The woman's eyes had no pupils. Alastair Finch pressed his face against the archive window, watching as security dragged her away from the Meridian Light Tower's base. Her screams echoed off the glass facades of Corporate Plaza, but what haunted him wasn't the sound, it was the way her irises had expanded to consume the black entirely, leaving only pale blue discs that reflected the eternal noon-bright glow of the city. "Light sickness," whispered Dr. Riley from behind him, her voice carrying the clinical detachment that all Upper District residents had perfected. "Third case this week in Sublevel 7. Alastair's reflection stared back at him from the window, dark circles under gray eyes, skin pale from working in the archive's artificial twilight. His insomnia had grown worse lately, his body rejecting even the simulated sleep cycles that everyone else seemed to accept without question. Outside, the light towers hummed their constant electric lullaby, bathing Neon City in perpetual day. When was the last time anyone saw actual darkness? He asked, not expecting an answer. Doctor paused in organizing her files. "Darkness is chaos, Finch. You know that. The illumination accords exist for a reason." But as he watched the woman's empty eyes disappear into the security van, Alastair wondered if chaos might be preferable to whatever was happening to them all. The Meridian Archive occupied 17 floors of the Synthesis Corporation's central tower, its climate-controlled chambers holding the collected knowledge of humanity's pre-illumination era. Alastair had worked here for 6 years, cataloging the remnants of a world that had known both day and night, a concept so foreign to most citizens that it belonged in the mythology section. He arrived at 0800 hours, as the light towers shifted from their dawn spectrum to morning intensity. The transition was seamless. A gradual increase in lumens designed to mimic natural sunrise, though no one alive remembered what that actually looked like. The last natural night had ended 43 years ago, when the Great Blackout of 2089 claimed 12,000 lives in a single evening of chaos. Never again, the illumination accords declared. Never again would darkness terrorize the innocent. "Morning, Finch." Rebecca Moss, his supervisor, appeared beside his workstation with her daily assignment tablet. Her smile was regulation bright, enhanced by the mood stabilizers that kept Upper District employees properly productive. "I've got something special for you today. Executive request." Alastair accepted the tablet, noting the Synthesis Corp logo in the corner. Everything in the city bore that logo or one of its subsidiaries: Eternal Light Solutions, Perpetual Dawn Industries, Never Night Security. The corporate merger 20 years ago had consolidated all illumination services under one umbrella, ensuring consistent coverage across all districts. "Medical archives," he read from the assignment. "I thought those were restricted. Executive privilege. Someone upstairs is researching historical sleep disorders." Rebecca's smile flickered slightly. Probably related to the recent uptick in irregularities. The irregularities. That's what they called the light sickness cases officially. Citizens in the lower districts developing symptoms that the medical establishment struggled to categorize: dilated pupils, severe insomnia, hallucinations, and eventually a complete breakdown of circadian rhythms. The condition seemed to progress in stages, with the final stage being the complete loss of pupils that Alastair had witnessed that morning. He made his way to Subarchive Level 3, where the restricted medical files were stored in hardcopy format. A security measure from the paranoid early days of the illumination accords. The chamber's lighting was dimmer than the main floors, a concession to document preservation that made Alastair feel slightly more human. The files told a disturbing story. Pre-illumination medical records documented the importance of darkness in human physiology, something called circadian rhythms that regulated sleep, hormone production, and cellular repair. The human body, it seemed, had evolved for millions of years with a natural cycle of light and darkness. Melatonin production requires sustained periods of darkness, read one research paper from 2084. Subjects exposed to continuous artificial light for more than 72 hours show severe disruption of sleep patterns, elevated cortisol, and decreased immune function. Alastair's hands trembled slightly as he turned the pages. Every symptom described in the 45-year-old research matched the irregularities affecting the lower districts. The only difference was duration. The old studies looked at days of light exposure. Neon City citizens had endured 4 decades. A soft chime indicated someone entering the archive chamber. Alastair quickly closed the file as Dr. Riley approached, her heels clicking on the polished floor. "Finding anything interesting?" she asked, her tone casual but her eyes sharp. "Standard historical documentation," Alastair replied, filing the papers back in their designated slots. "Though I have to ask, why store medical research in hard copy? Everything else is digital." The synthesis board was concerned about data corruption in the early years. "Can't risk losing important safety information." Dr. Riley moved closer, ostensibly examining the file labels. "The illumination accord saved us from the chaos of darkness, Finch. Sometimes I think people forget how many died during the Great Blackout." 12,000, Alastair said automatically. "Exactly. Panic, violence, complete social breakdown. All because the power grid failed for 18 hours. She met his eyes. "We've built a perfect world here. Safe, productive, efficient. No crime after dark because there is no dark. No depression caused by seasonal light changes. No accidents from poor visibility." Alastair nodded, but something in her emphasis on perfect made him uneasy. He'd spent 6 years in these archives, reading about the world that came before. It hadn't been perfect, but it had been complete. There had been something called night, when people rested and dreamed and saw stars that were now invisible behind the constant glow of the light towers. "Dr. Riley," he said carefully, "what do you think is causing the irregularities in the lower districts?" Her smile became fixed, professional. "Genetic predisposition to light sensitivity, most likely. Some people are simply less adapted to our modern environment. Fortunately, Synthesis Medical is developing treatments." "What kind of treatments?" "Pupil dilation therapy, for one. If the eyes can't adjust to proper light levels, we help them adapt." She straightened, her tone becoming brisk. "You should focus on your archival duties, Finch. Leave the medical research to the experts." As she walked away, Alastair felt a chill that had nothing to do with the chamber's climate control. Pupil dilation therapy. He thought of the woman outside the light tower that morning, her eyes blank and eerily reflective. Was that adaptation, or was it something else entirely? The message arrived through the archive's internal communication system at 1347 hours, 47 minutes into Alastair's lunch break. He'd been sitting in the tower's observation lounge, trying to eat a regulation nutrition bar while staring out at the cityscape. The lower district spread below like a glowing circuit board, every street and building bathed in the white-blue radiance of the light towers. Finch, report to Subarchive Level 7 immediately. Medical consultation required. Dr. Elizabeth Voss, Synthesis Medical Division, *. Alastair had never heard of Dr. Voss, and Subarchive Level 7 was deeper than he'd ever been authorized to go. The elevator descended past the normal archival floors, past the building service levels, into sections of the tower that most employees didn't know existed. Level 7 was different. The corridors were narrower, the lighting dimmer, not the carefully calibrated illumination of the upper floors, but harsh fluorescence that hummed with electrical interference. It reminded him of the old maintenance tunnels he'd read about in the city's historical blueprints, spaces that predated the great redesign that followed the illumination accords. Dar. Voss was waiting in a small conference room, a woman in her 60s with prematurely gray hair and tired eyes. She wore the standard white coat of Synthesis Medical, but something about her seemed different, less polished, more human than the typical corporate doctors. "Mr. Finch, thank you for coming. Please, sit." She gestured to a chair across from a table loaded with files and data tablets. "I understand you've been researching historical sleep disorders. As assigned by my supervisor, yes. And what have you found?" Alastair hesitated. Something about Dr. Voss's manner suggested this wasn't a standard corporate consultation. The usual historical curiosities. Pre-illumination research on circadian rhythms, light therapy, things that are largely irrelevant now. Dr. Voss studied him for a long moment. Mr. Finch, I'm going to share some information with you that is not part of your official assignment. What I show you will be disturbing. But I believe you have a right to know, especially given your own condition. My condition? Your insomnia. Your rejection of the standard sleep medications. Your body's resistance to the light cycle adjustments that work for most citizens. She leaned forward. You're not adapting to our illuminated world, Mr. Finch. You're fighting it. She activated a data tablet and turned it toward him. Medical charts filled the screen, brain scans, hormone level readings, cellular analysis reports. The patient ID was his own. You've been monitoring me? All upper district employees undergo regular health screenings. What we found in your results is unique. She highlighted sections of the data. Your melatonin production is attempting to follow a natural circadian rhythm, despite 4 decades of constant light exposure. Your cortisol levels spike at what would be natural sunset times. Your brain is trying to sleep and wake according to a cycle it has never experienced. Alistair stared at the data, his mouth dry. What does that mean? It means you're genetically predisposed to need darkness, Mr. Finch. Real darkness. And you're not alone. She called up another set of files. We've identified approximately 700 citizens across all districts with similar patterns. Most of them are in the lower districts, where the light exposure is more intense. The irregularities. That's what we call them officially. But Mr. Finch, they're not irregularities. They're the natural human response to an unnatural environment. Dr. Voss's voice dropped to a whisper. The light sickness isn't a disease. It's our bodies trying to adapt to something they were never meant to endure. The room seemed to spin slightly. Alistair gripped the table edge. Why are you telling me this? If Synthesis Medical knows the cause. Because Synthesis Medical isn't looking for a cure. They're looking for a way to make the adaptation permanent. Dr. Voss pulled up images that made Alistair's stomach turn. Surgical procedures, brain implants, genetic modification protocols. The pupil dilation therapy is just the beginning. They want to eliminate the human need for darkness entirely. That's... He couldn't find words. Monstrous? Yes. But from their perspective, it's logical. The Illumination Accords have made Neon City the most productive metropolis in human history. Crime is virtually non-existent. Productivity never stops. The economy operates at theoretical maximum efficiency. Her laugh was bitter. All it cost was our humanity. Alistair thought of the woman at the light tower that morning, her empty eyes reflecting the corporate glow. What happened to her? The woman with the eyes? Stage 4 light adaptation. Her pupils have been surgically removed and replaced with reflective implants. She'll never need to sleep again, never suffer from depression or anxiety, never feel the disorientation that comes from our bodies expecting a day-night cycle. Dr. Voss closed the tablet. She'll also never dream, never experience true rest, never feel the peace that comes with natural darkness. Why are you showing me this? Dr. Voss was quiet for a long moment. Because there are people who remember, Mr. Finch. People who believe that humanity deserves a choice. We call ourselves the Umbra, and we need someone with access to the historical archives. Access to what? The original blueprints of the Light Tower network. The technical specifications that would allow someone to, temporarily disrupt the system. She met his eyes. Long enough to give the city its first real night in 43 years. Alistair felt something shift inside him, a recognition he couldn't name. For the first time in months, his chronic exhaustion lifted slightly. That would be treason. Violation of the Illumination Accords. They'd execute anyone involved. Yes, they would. Dr. Voss stood, gathering her files. But Mr. Finch, look around you. Look at what we've become. Is this survival worth preserving? She moved toward the door, then paused. If you're interested in learning more, there's a maintenance access tunnel beneath the Meridian Tower's foundation. Level B7, behind the old electrical panels. Tomorrow at 2100 hours. Dr. Voss, I can't. You can't what? Continue to live half alive, fighting your own biology every day? Continue to watch people like that woman have their humanity surgically removed? She opened the door. The choice is yours, Mr. Finch. But choose quickly. The Umbra won't wait forever, and neither will Synthesis Medical. As the door closed behind her, Alistair sat alone in the humming fluorescent light, surrounded by the evidence of his own genetic rebellion against the illuminated world. For the first time in his adult life, he understood what he was fighting for. It wasn't just sleep he needed. It was the right to be human. The maintenance tunnels beneath Meridian Tower existed in a different world. Here, 40 stories below the gleaming corporate plaza, the illumination accords held no sway. Emergency lighting cast long shadows between massive support columns, and for the first time in his adult life, Alistair experienced something approaching natural darkness. He'd spent the entire day wrestling with Dr. Voss's revelation, mechanically cataloging files while his mind raced through the implications. By 2100 hours, curiosity had overcome caution. The access tunnel was exactly where she'd indicated, hidden behind a cluster of electrical panels that hummed with the power that fed the light towers above. You came. Dr. Voss emerged from the shadows, no longer wearing her corporate medical coat. In civilian clothes, she looked younger, more alive. I wasn't certain you would. I'm not certain I should have. Doubt is healthy. Follow me. She led him deeper into the tunnel system, past junction boxes and maintenance robots, through sections of the city's infrastructure that predated the Great Reconstruction. The air grew cooler, carrying scents that seemed foreign after years of the tower's recycled atmosphere, concrete, metal, something organic that might have been Earth. The tunnels were part of the original subway system, Dr. Voss explained as they walked. Abandoned after the Great Blackout, when public transportation was deemed too vulnerable to power failures. Now they serve our purposes. They emerged into a vast chamber that had once been a subway station. The original architecture was still visible, curved walls, tiled surfaces, platforms designed for trains that would never run again. But the space had been transformed into something that resembled an underground village. Dozens of people moved through the chamber, working at improvised workstations, tending gardens that somehow flourished in the dim light, gathering around areas where actual shadows created zones of deeper darkness. Children played games that Alistair didn't recognize, their laughter echoing off the vaulted ceiling. Welcome to Haven Station, Dr. Voss said. The largest Umbra settlement in the city. A man approached them, tall and angular with prematurely gray hair and eyes that seemed to hold depths Alistair had never seen in the surface world. Unlike the citizens above, his pupils contracted and dilated naturally as he moved between light and shadow. This is Marcus Kane, Dr. Voss said. He leads our cell. Kane studied Alistair with an intensity that was unsettling but not unfriendly. Elizabeth tells me you have access to the tower construction files. I have access to historical archives, yes. Show him, Kane said to Dr. Voss. She led them to a wall covered with technical diagrams, photographs, and handwritten notes. It was a complete analysis of Neon City's light tower network, power sources, control systems, maintenance protocols, and most importantly, potential vulnerabilities. There are 47 primary towers and 300 secondary installations, Kane explained, pointing to a city map dotted with lights. The system is designed with redundancy. If one tower fails, others automatically compensate. But the entire network relies on a central coordination hub located in the Synthesis corporate complex. The Lumina Core, Dr. Voss added. It synchronizes the light cycles across all districts, manages power distribution, and monitors for system failures. Alastair studied the diagrams, his archival training helping him process the technical information. You want to shut it down. Temporarily, Kane said. Long enough to give the city its first natural night in 4 decades. Long enough to show people what they've lost. And then what? Synthesis will just restart the system, probably with better security. Kane's expression grew grim. By then, it won't matter. Do you know what happens to someone with advanced light sickness when they experience true darkness for the first time in years? Alastair shook his head. Their neural pathways begin to restore themselves. Their hormone production normalizes. Their bodies remember what it means to be human. Kane's voice carried a fierce hope. One night of darkness could reverse months of adaptation therapy. It could wake up the entire city. Dr. Voss activated a tablet, showing him video files that made his stomach clench. These are surveillance recordings from the lower districts. Stage 3 and 4 light adaptation patients during the brief power outages that happened during maintenance cycles. The footage was disturbing. Citizens with the blank, reflective eyes he'd seen that morning standing perfectly still in the momentary darkness, their faces slack with confusion. But then, as their modified eyes began to adjust, something changed. Expression returned to their faces. They began to move naturally, looking around as if seeing their environment for the first time. The adaptation isn't permanent, Dr. Voss explained. The brain modifications are reversible if the patient is exposed to natural light-dark cycles soon enough. But Synthesis Medical knows this? Of course they do. Why do you think they've accelerated the adaptation program? They want to reach a critical mass of modified citizens before anyone can interfere. Kane pointed to a progress chart on the wall. At current rates, 60% of the lower district population will undergo adaptation within 6 months. After that, it won't matter if we shut down the towers. Most of the city won't remember why darkness matters. Alastair felt a chill of recognition. That's why they wanted me to research historical sleep disorders. They're looking for people like me, genetic resistors who might cause problems. Exactly. And when they find us, we'll be given a choice, voluntary adaptation or compulsory treatment. Kane's laugh was bitter. There's no third option in their system. A young woman approached their group, moving with a fluid grace that marked her as someone who had grown up with natural light-dark cycles. Marcus, we have a problem. Security sweep in Tunnel 7. They're getting closer to the eastern settlements. Kane nodded grimly. How long before they find us? Weeks, maybe less. They're using heat sensors now, tracking the thermal signatures from our gardens and workshops. Then we're out of time. Kane turned back to Alastair. The original plan was to spend months preparing, mapping every system, identifying every potential failure point. We don't have months anymore. Dr. Voss pulled up another set of files. We need the technical specifications for the Lumina Core's security systems. Access codes, maintenance schedules, structural vulnerabilities, anything that might give us a chance to reach the central hub. Even if I could get that information, I'm not a saboteur. I'm an archivist. Which is exactly why we need you, Kane said. This isn't about explosives or violence. It's about understanding the system well enough to turn it off cleanly. No casualties, no permanent damage, just one night of natural darkness. The young woman, Maya, Alastair learned, spread a new set of documents on their makeshift table. We've been infiltrating the maintenance crews for months. We have people positioned throughout the power grid. All we need is the coordination data that would let us shut down the core without triggering the automatic restart protocols. Alastair studied the faces around him. These people lived in shadows and artificial twilight, creating pockets of humanity in the spaces between the light towers' reach. They had gardens and families and hope, things he'd forgotten were possible in the gleaming corporate world above. What happened to you? He asked Kane. How did you end up down here? Kane's expression darkened. I was a synthesis engineer for 12 years. Helped design some of the towers you see today. It wasn't until my daughter started showing signs of light sensitivity that I began to question what we'd built. He pulled out a faded photograph, a little girl with bright eyes and a natural smile. They wanted to adapt her at age 7. Remove her pupils, install neural regulators, make her normal. I brought her down here instead. Where is she now? Growing up in darkness and light, learning what it means to be human. She's never seen a light tower up close, and if I have my way, she never will. Dr. Voss touched Alistair's arm gently. We're not asking you to decide tonight. But we are asking you to consider what kind of world you want to live in. One where humanity adapts itself to serve corporate efficiency, or one where technology serves human needs. As they made their way back through the tunnels, Alistair's mind was a whirlwind of technical specifications, moral implications, and the memory of those empty reflective eyes. The woman at the light tower had been someone's daughter once. Someone's mother, perhaps. Now she was a perfect corporate citizen, productive and compliant and utterly hollow. Dr. Voss, he said as they reached the access tunnel. If we do this, if we somehow manage to shut down the towers for one night, what makes you think people will choose humanity over efficiency? She paused at the threshold between shadow and fluorescent light. Because despite 43 years of conditioning, your body still remembers what it needs. You still can't sleep properly. You still feel that something is missing. She met his eyes. That feeling isn't a malfunction, Alistair. It's your humanity, refusing to be deleted. As he made his way back to his apartment in the tower's residential section, Alistair carried with him the sense of earth and growing things, the echo of children's laughter, and the radical possibility that the world could be different. For the first time in years, he fell asleep naturally, dreaming of stars he had never seen. The next 3 weeks passed in a carefully orchestrated dance of deception. Alistair maintained his regular archival duties while systematically copying every file related to the Light Tower Network's construction and maintenance. The historical records contained more than technical specifications, they held the story of humanity's surrender to corporate benevolence. The Illumination Accords hadn't been imposed by force. They'd been welcomed with gratitude after the chaos of the Great Blackout. Citizens had literally signed away their right to darkness in exchange for safety and security. The towers had been marketed as liberation from the uncertainties of night, from the dangers that lurked in shadows, from the inefficiencies of sleeping 8 hours out of every 24. Revolutionary urban lifestyle enhancement, the marketing materials called it. Live more. Sleep never. Shine always. In the evenings, Alistair made careful trips to Haven Station, each journey teaching him more about navigation through the city's hidden spaces. The Umbra had developed an entire infrastructure in the tunnels, workshops, gardens, libraries filled with books about stars and seasons and all the aspects of human experience that had been deemed obsolete. Maya became his primary guide, teaching him the skills he'd never needed in the sanitized world above. How to move quietly through shadows. How to recognize the subtle signs of security sweeps. How to read the city's hidden geography through maintenance markers and forgotten architectural details. You're learning fast, she said one evening as they worked together in the document archive, the Umbra's collection of pre-illumination texts and images. Most surface dwellers take months to develop tunnel sense. I think I'm motivated by spite, Alistair replied, scanning a photograph of a natural sunset. The image was so alien that his brain struggled to process it, a sky that changed from blue to orange to deep purple, with actual darkness gathering at the horizon. That's healthy. Spite kept us alive during the early years, when everyone thought we were just criminals hiding from progress. Maya showed him a hand-drawn map of the tunnel system, marked with dozens of settlements and safe houses. Now they're starting to understand that we're not running from something, we're running toward it. Dr. Voss appeared beside their workspace, carrying a data tablet that she set down with unusual urgency. We have a problem. Synthesis Medical has accelerated the adaptation program. The tablet displayed internal corporate memos, procurement orders, and surgical schedules. Alistair's blood ran cold as he read the details. Mass processing, he said. Starting next week. They're converting the old stadium into a medical facility capable of adapting 500 people per day. Dr. Voss pulled up architectural plans. They're calling it voluntary, of course. Free health screenings for light sensitivity, with immediate treatment for anyone showing symptoms. Maya studied the procurement lists. Neural implants, pupil replacement hardware, hormone regulators, they're buying enough equipment to process half the city. It's not random, Alastair realized, cross-referencing the data with his archival research. They're targeting people with genetic markers for circadian resistance. People like me. Dr. Voss nodded grimly. The screening process is designed to identify anyone whose body still responds to natural light-dark cycles. They're systematically eliminating the part of the population that might question the system. Kane joined them from across the chamber, his face set in hard lines. How long before they find us? The screening data includes biometric tracking. Once they process everyone in the upper districts, they'll have a complete map of who's missing from their system. Dar. Voss pulled up surveillance footage from the plaza above. Look at this. The images showed security checkpoints being installed at every major intersection, biometric scanners that would identify anyone not registered in the adaptation program. Citizens lined up cheerfully for their screenings, many wearing the blank expressions of advanced light adaptation. We have 48 hours, Kane said. Maybe less. After that, anyone not in their database becomes a fugitive. Alastair felt the walls of the tunnels pressing in around him. Even if we had the complete technical specifications, 2 days isn't enough time to plan a proper shutdown of the core. Then we don't plan a proper shutdown, Maya said quietly. We plan a desperate one. Kane was already moving toward the communications center. Signal all cells. Emergency protocols. We go tomorrow night. Marcus, wait. Dr. Voss caught his arm. If we rush this, if we trigger the security systems without proper preparation, then we trigger them. Better to try and fail than to wait and watch everyone we care about get processed through that facility. As the chamber erupted into controlled chaos, people gathering equipment, reviewing hastily drawn plans, saying goodbye to loved ones who might not survive the attempt, Alastair found himself strangely calm. The decision had been made for them. Tomorrow night, they would either give Neon City its first taste of natural darkness in 43 years, or they would die trying. Maya appeared at his side with a backpack of technical equipment. Ready for some real archive work? He thought of the woman with the empty eyes, of the children in this chamber who had never seen stars, of his own sleepless nights fighting a biology that corporate efficiency deemed obsolete. Let's go steal some darkness, he said. Dr. Voss gathered the core team around a table covered with technical diagrams. The Lumina core is located on the 42nd floor of the Synthesis corporate complex. Physical security includes biometric locks, pressure sensors, and automated defense systems. Electronic security includes isolated networks, encryption protocols, and real-time monitoring. Vulnerabilities? Kane asked. 1. The core requires manual override capability for maintenance. If we can reach the central control room during a scheduled maintenance window, we can shut down the entire network without triggering alarms. Alastair studied the timeline. The next maintenance window is tomorrow at 0300 hours. That gives us exactly 17 minutes of reduced security coverage. 17 minutes to get inside, shut down the system, and escape before they realize what happened, Maya summarized. What could go wrong? Kane's smile was sharp. Everything. But we're going to try anyway. As they finalized their desperate plan, Alastair realized that somewhere in the past weeks, his chronic insomnia had disappeared. Surrounded by people fighting for the right to sleep naturally, working toward a goal that transcended corporate productivity metrics, he had found a purpose that let his exhausted mind finally rest. Tomorrow night, they would either restore the darkness that humanity had lost, or they would fail spectacularly. But for the first time in his adult life, Alastair Finch was no longer afraid of the dark. The maintenance elevator ascended through the Synthesis corporate complex with mechanical precision, carrying Alastair and Maya toward the most heavily guarded floor in Neon City. Their disguises were perfect: regulation technician uniforms, authentic identification badges, and the kind of board efficiency that made security guards look right through maintenance workers. "Remember," Maya whispered through their comm system, "once we're in the core chamber, we have exactly 17 minutes before the automated systems resume full monitoring." Below them, the rest of the Umbra teams were already in position. Kane led a group that would disable the backup power systems in the building's subbasements. Dr. Voss coordinated from Haven Station, ready to guide the medical response when adapted citizens began experiencing the neurological effects of true darkness. Dozens of other cells throughout the city stood by to prevent panic when the lights went out. The elevator stopped at floor 42. The doors opened onto a corridor that hummed with barely contained power, lined with displays showing the status of every light tower in the city. At the end of the hall, through reinforced glass doors, lay the Lumina core. "Biological scan complete," announced an automated voice as they approached the security checkpoint. "Technicians Reyes and Riley, you are cleared for scheduled maintenance." The stolen identities held. In 12 hours, when the real Reyes and Riley reported for their shift, the deception would be discovered. But 12 hours from now, either the mission would be complete or they would all be dead. The core chamber was a cathedral of light and technology. Massive servers lined the walls, their status indicators creating constellations of green and blue. In the center of the room stood the control console, a semicircular array of displays and interfaces that regulated every photon of illumination in the city. Maya immediately went to work on the hardware, accessing maintenance panels and connecting bypass devices that would prevent the system from restarting automatically. Alastair approached the main console, his hands trembling slightly as he interfaced with technology that controlled the lives of 12 million people. The system was more complex than their planning had anticipated. Shutting down the towers required not just one command, but a carefully orchestrated sequence that would prevent cascade failures and avoid triggering the emergency protocols. "Status?" Maya asked, her own work proceeding smoothly. "Complicated. The shutdown sequence has 17 checkpoints, and each one has to be authenticated manually." Alastair's fingers flew over the interface, drawing on months of studying the technical documentation. "I need 8 more minutes. We have 6. Outside the chamber, security guards walked their routine patrols, unaware that everything they had been trained to protect was about to change forever. In the tunnels below, Umbra families gathered in spaces that would soon echo with the sounds of a city experiencing its first real night. The console displayed a cascade of warnings as Alastair began the shutdown sequence. Safety protocols activated. Unauthorized power reduction detected. System override required. Override authorized, he whispered, entering the codes he'd memorized from the historical archives. Maintenance Protocol 77 Alpha. The first tower went dark. Somewhere in the Eastern District, a circle of artificial day disappeared for the first time in 43 years. Citizens would be looking up in confusion, trying to understand why the eternal light had failed. Then the second tower. And the third. "Maya, we need to go." Security response in 3 minutes. "Almost finished. Just need to, there." She pulled the last of her bypass devices. "The automatic restart is disabled. Even if they get to the core, they'll need 6 hours to bring the system back online." The city outside began to transform as more towers went dark. Through the chamber's windows, Alastair could see sections of Neon City experiencing something unprecedented: actual darkness. Not the dim emergency lighting that activated during brief maintenance outages, but true absence of artificial illumination. And in that darkness, stars became visible for the first time in 4 decades. "My God," Maya breathed, staring upward through the reinforced glass. The night sky revealed itself slowly, as if uncertain of its welcome. First the brightest stars, then others, until the dome above them glittered with lights that had been waiting patiently behind the corporate glow. The city's residents were emerging onto balconies and rooftops, many of them seeing the stars for the first time in their lives. "Security breach in core chamber," announced the building's automated voice as alarms began to sound throughout the complex. Alistair initiated the final shutdown command, watching as the last of the Central District towers began to power down. The corporate plaza below was transforming into something unrecognizable, shadows pooled between buildings, and citizens moved through genuine darkness for the first time in their adult lives. "Time to go," Maya said, shouldering her equipment pack. But as they turned toward the exit, the chamber doors sealed shut with a hydraulic hiss. Emergency lighting bathed the room in red, and a new voice spoke over the intercom system, calm, authoritative, and entirely too familiar. "Mr. Finch, I'm disappointed but not surprised." Dr. Riley stepped into view through the chamber's observation window, flanked by security personnel in full tactical gear. Her usual professional smile was gone, replaced by an expression of cold calculation. "Did you really think we didn't know about your nocturnal activities?" she asked through the intercom. "We've been monitoring your biometrics for weeks. Every trip to the tunnels, every meeting with the terrorists, every file you copied from the archives." Alistair felt Maya tense beside him, her hand moving instinctively toward the emergency equipment on her belt. "We're trapped." "Not yet," he replied, studying the chamber's layout. The core's backup systems were still active, maintaining essential functions even as the main towers went dark. "Dr. Riley, you need to let us out of here. I need to do nothing except wait for you to surrender." Riley's voice carried the same clinical detachment she'd shown when discussing the woman with the empty eyes. "The damage you've done is temporary. We'll have full illumination restored within hours." "Look outside," Alistair said, gesturing toward the windows. "Look at what you're taking away from them." Beyond the glass, the city was experiencing a miracle. Citizens stood in groups on darkened streets, pointing upward at stars they'd never seen. Children who had been adapted months ago were crying, not from fear, but from a neurological awakening as their modified brains began to remember what darkness could mean. In the medical districts, Dr. Voss's teams were already reporting that Stage 3 light adaptation patients were showing signs of neural restoration. "I see chaos," Dr. Riley replied. "I see inefficiency and confusion and the return of everything the Illumination Accords were designed to prevent. You see people remembering how to be human. Humanity is inefficient, Mr. Finch. Biological sleep cycles waste 8 hours of every day. Natural lighting creates seasonal depression, circadian disorders, and completely unnecessary variations in productivity. We've spent 40 years perfecting the human experience, removing the flaws that evolution left behind." Maya moved closer to the main console, her eyes on the backup power systems that were still feeding the chamber's electronics. "Alistair, if I can overload the emergency systems." "You'll kill yourselves and accomplish nothing," Dr. Riley interrupted. "The core chamber is sealed. Even if you disable the remaining systems, you'll simply suffocate in the dark." But Alistair was no longer listening to her threats. Through the windows, he could see something that made his breath catch. The adapted citizens, the ones with the empty, reflective eyes, were gathering in the darkened plazas. And they weren't standing motionless anymore. They were looking up at the stars. "Dr. Riley," he said quietly, "how many people have you processed through the adaptation program?" "Approximately 40,000 to date." "Why?" "Look outside." She turned toward the windows, and Alistair saw her confidence falter for the first time. The adapted citizens weren't behaving according to their conditioning. Their reflective eyes were tracking the unfamiliar patterns of starlight, and their faces, which should have been blank and emotionless, were showing something that looked remarkably like wonder. "The adaptations are failing," Maya observed. "Even the neural modifications can't override the biological response to natural darkness." "Impossible," Dr. Riley said, but her voice lacked conviction. "The implants are permanent. The neural pathways have been surgically altered." "You altered the pathways," Alastair replied, understanding flooding through him. But you couldn't alter the underlying genetic code. The moment their brains experienced true darkness, the original programming began to reassert itself. On the screens around them, emergency reports were flooding in from across the city. Medical centers were receiving thousands of adapted citizens complaining of vision problems and strange sensations. What they were actually experiencing was the return of natural pupil dilation, the reactivation of dormant neural circuits, and the beginning of genuine healing. 40,000 people, Maya said. All starting to remember what they lost. Dr. Riley activated her comm system. Security teams to the core chamber. Begin manual override procedures immediately. But the building's security systems were failing as well. Kane's team had done their work well. The backup power systems were operating at minimal capacity, and the elevators had been disabled. It would take the security team's precious time to reach the 42nd floor. Even if you restore the towers, Alastair told Dr. Riley, it's too late. 40,000 people have now experienced what you took away from them. They'll remember. And they'll demand it back. They'll adapt again. We'll improve the procedures, make the modifications more permanent. Will you? Maya had reached the backup power controls. Because I don't think the city is going to let you. Through the chamber windows, they could see crowds gathering in the darkened streets. But these weren't the panicked mobs that the illumination accords had been designed to prevent. These were people experiencing wonder, families pointing out constellations to children, couples walking hand in hand through shadows they had never shared. And leading them, emerging from tunnels and maintenance areas throughout the city, were the Umbra. Thousands of people who had preserved their humanity in the spaces between the light towers' reach, now helping their fellow citizens navigate their first natural night. The tunnels, Dr. Riley said, understanding dawning in her voice. There are thousands of you. There were always thousands of us, Alastair replied. We were just waiting for the right moment to remind everyone else what they were missing. Maya's hands hovered over the backup power controls. If I shut these down, the chamber loses life support. But it also means they can't restart the core remotely. Do it, Alastair said. You'll die, Dr. Riley warned through the intercom. Maybe. But 40,000 people will live as humans instead of as perfectly efficient machines. Maya looked at him, her eyes bright with determination. Any last words for the corporate efficiency experts? Alastair thought of the woman with the empty eyes, of the children growing up in Haven Station, of his own sleepless nights fighting a biology that refused to be deleted. Tell them that some things are worth more than productivity. Maya slammed her hand down on the emergency shutdown. The backup systems died with an electronic whine, and the core chamber plunged into absolute darkness. For a moment, there was only silence and the sound of their own breathing. Then, gradually, their eyes began to adjust, pupils dilating naturally for the first time in either of their adult lives. And through the windows, starlight provided just enough illumination to see each other's faces. It's beautiful, Maya whispered. Outside, the city continued its transformation. Emergency services were functioning on backup power, preventing any real danger to the population. But the towers remained dark, and 12 million people were experiencing their first natural night in 43 years. Dr. Riley's voice came through the intercom one last time, tinged with something that might have been despair. The board will never allow this. They'll restore the system, strengthen the security, eliminate anyone who opposes the accords. Will they? Alastair asked, looking out at the crowds of people discovering stars. Because I think you're about to find out what happens when an entire city remembers what it means to be human. The chamber's emergency oxygen supply would last approximately 6 hours, just long enough for the citizens of Neon City to experience a complete natural night cycle. Just long enough for 40,000 adapted people to fully realize what had been taken from them. Just long enough for the corporate efficiency that had ruled their lives for 4 decades to face its first real challenge. As Alastair watched the stars wheel overhead through the chamber windows, he felt his body beginning to relax in ways he hadn't experienced since childhood. His circadian rhythms, suppressed for 32 years, were finally free to function as evolution had intended. For the first time in his adult life, he felt genuinely tired in a way that promised real rest. Alastair woke to the sound of welding torches and human voices. Sunlight, actual sunlight, not the artificial illumination of the towers, streamed through the chamber windows, painting everything in warm, golden hues that his eyes had never seen. The core chamber doors stood open. Maya was sitting nearby, talking quietly with Kane and Dr. Voss. All of them looked different in natural light, more solid, more real than they had ever seemed under the corporate glow. "How long?" Alastair asked, his voice rough from sleep. 14 hours, Dr. Voss replied. The longest natural night in 43 years, followed by the first natural dawn that most of the city had ever seen. Kane helped him to his feet. The emergency oxygen ran out around 0500. "We thought we'd lost you both. But the security teams opened the chamber as soon as the sun came up." "The towers?" "Still offline. The bypass devices Maya installed are more sophisticated than Synthesis anticipated. They're estimating 6 days minimum to restore full operation." Alastair moved to the windows, looking out at a city transformed. The neon city he had known, gleaming, uniform, efficiently illuminated, was gone. In its place was something organic and varied, with deep shadows and bright sunlit spaces, with people moving at natural rhythms instead of corporate schedules. "What about Dr. Riley? The security forces?" Maya joined him at the window. "Funny thing about security forces when they're made up of people who've just experienced their first real night in decades. Turns out, most of them liked what they saw." In the plaza below, crews were dismantling the biometric scanners that had been installed for the adaptation program. Citizens moved freely through spaces that had been checkpoints just 24 hours earlier. "The adaptation facility? Closed indefinitely," Dr. Voss said. "About half the staff walked out after experiencing natural darkness. The other half are too busy dealing with the 40,000 people demanding reversal procedures." Kane showed him a data tablet displaying news feeds from across the city. The headlines told the story: "Citizens demand natural night cycles, adaptation program suspended, corporate board agrees 2 illumination reforms." "They're negotiating?" Alastair asked. "They don't have a choice. When 40,000 people simultaneously demand medical treatment to reverse their adaptations, and when another 12 million refuse to return to perpetual daylight schedules, even corporate efficiency has to bend." Dr. Voss pulled up another set of documents. The proposed compromise: natural night cycles from 2200 to 0600 hours, reduced tower illumination, and voluntary adaptation programs only. No more mass processing, no more genetic screening for circadian resistance. "And if they change their minds later?" Maya smiled, gesturing toward the plaza where Umbra members worked openly alongside city maintenance crews. "That's why we're not going back underground. The tunnels were a sanctuary, but they were also a prison. Now we work in the open, making sure everyone remembers what they almost lost." As they made their way down to street level, Alastair marveled at the changes a single night had wrought. Children who had never seen natural shadows played games that involved hiding and seeking. Couples discovered the romance of starlight. Artists began creating works inspired by the interplay of darkness and illumination. But perhaps most remarkably, the adapted citizens were healing faster than anyone had predicted. The neural pathways that corporate medicine had tried to suppress were reasserting themselves with startling vigor, as if the human brain had been waiting decades for permission to function naturally. "There's something you should see," Kane said, leading them toward the medical district. The woman Alastair had seen that first morning, the one with the empty, reflective eyes, sat in a clinic waiting room, reading a book about astronomy. Her pupils had returned, dark and naturally responsive to light. When she looked up and smiled at the group, Alastair saw something in her expression that corporate efficiency could never quantify. She looked human. "The reversal procedures are working better than expected," Dr. Voss explained. "Turns out the human brain is remarkably resilient. Given the chance, it wants to heal. As they walked back through the city, Alistair reflected on the cost of their victory. The corporate world he had known was gone, replaced by something messier but more alive. Productivity would probably drop. Citizens would waste time sleeping 8 hours out of every 24. Some would suffer from seasonal depression when winter came. But they would dream again. They would see stars. They would experience the deep, restorative rest that came with natural darkness. Most importantly, they would have the right to choose. The sun was setting as they reached Haven Station, the first natural sunset that Alistair had ever witnessed. The sky transformed through colors that no artificial light could replicate, and as darkness gathered naturally around them, the city's lights began to dim according to humanity's ancient rhythms. In a few hours, Neon City would experience its second natural night, and its third, and eventually its citizens would forget that there had ever been a time when darkness was forbidden. But in the tunnels beneath the city, in spaces that had once been sanctuaries for the genetically rebellious, new archives were being established. Records of the Illumination Accords, testimonies from adapted citizens, and most importantly, photographs of the stars as they appeared during the last natural night. The night when humanity remembered what it meant to be human. Alistair Finch, Master Archivist, had finally found something worth preserving, the right to sleep naturally, to dream freely, and to find peace in the darkness that corporate efficiency had tried to steal. As the first stars appeared in the deepening sky, he closed his eyes and felt his body surrender to the natural rhythms he had fought to restore. For the first time in his adult life, he was genuinely tired in a way that promised genuine rest. The city settled into darkness around him, 12 million people learning together what it meant to end a day and begin a dream. The light towers stood silent against the starlit sky, monuments to humanity's brief experiment with perpetual efficiency. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new negotiations with corporate interests, new questions about how to balance human needs with urban functionality. But tonight, for the first time in 43 years, Neon City slept naturally. And in that darkness, surrounded by the quiet breathing of a city at rest, Alistair Finch finally found the peace he had been searching for all his life. The last natural night was over. The first of many had begun.